Welcome back to the Mission 43 podcast. Today we're sitting down with Butch Whiting. He is the CEO and co-founder of Kryptek Outdoor Group. He started with one other Army veteran, both helicopter pilots, and it's based right here in Eagle, Idaho.
And these guys are the real deal. Like, not only are they legit Army veterans, Iraq, Afghanistan vets, but they're true Idahoans and outdoorsmen. So they bring authenticity, credibility to both the battlefield and the backcountry, and they're local right here.
Awesome. Smash that subscribe button and let's get started with Butch.
Bang, bang, subscribe.
Join us in learning about the stories and the people who inspire us. This is the Mission 43 podcast. I'm Dan Nelson.
And I'm Brian Madden. Idaho is our home. The military is what we did.
Butch, thank you so much for being here, man. We're just starting hunting season right now. What tips do you have for all the people that are watching right now that are big game hunters, Idaho hunters of all kinds?
You know, Idaho's exploded here in the last few years, and I think more hunting licenses have been sold than ever. And it's a lot of folks that have never actually hunted.
Yeah.
And that is being driven by this new, I guess, idea of being self-reliant, being able to self-sustain. And a lot of these folks are moving to Idaho specifically because they desire the culture that's here. And so one of the biggest points of advice I would have is just to be cordial on the mountain, man. Yep. And I've seen different scenarios where, you know, you've got a lot of people in the same area and literally becomes a gunfight for that buck or that bull or something like that. In a lot of these areas that are easily accessible, especially around the Treasure Valley here, opening morning can be contentious. So,
dude, yeah, public area hunts here always are, and like you said, it's blowing up now.
Yeah, it is blowing up. And here's the other thing too. I guess you wouldn't think this, but figure out what you're hunting and then be able to identify what you're hunting. So I heard from a processor in Eagle, Idaho, that Fish and Game came through there to check, you know, and make sure all of his paperwork was dress and so on. And the processors were so busy last fall that they had to like turn away people, wow. Right? But the Fish and Game officer told the processor that they had confiscated 4 moose with elk tags on them. And I'm like, are you kidding me, right? But that's the type of, like, some of the folks that are out there, you know, that we're seeing in the field. And, you know, I love the fact that more people are getting out there and they're drawn back on what their grandfather did or their dad did. And maybe, you know, it was a lost skill set, almost like the gardening aspect. You know, how many people were planting gardens last year that hadn't had a garden ever, and they were digging up on the ditch bank behind their house?
I still refuse. Yeah. Nope, not doing it.
But the point is, you know, if you're, my point of with this is just, you know, just be respectful, be cordial, be safe. You know your backstop. Don't shoot unless you're sure of the target. And that'd probably be the best advice I could throw out for what we're seeing right now in Idaho.
Well, you're a super experienced, you know, hunter and outdoorsman, but beyond that, you're the co-founder and CEO of Kryptek, obviously an Idaho-based company making all these amazing pieces of equipment, everything that you're wearing right now, but really a revolutionary camo pattern. Mm-hmm. And kind of going back, like, how did you become the co-founder and CEO of an international company?
It started off with a passion for hunting, and basically myself and Josh Cleghorn, the other co-founder, when we weren't doing missions and we weren't flying missions, we would be, you know, talking and daydreaming about how cool would it be to be in the outdoor industry. And you know, I was the troop commander for Renegade Troop 43 ACR. Cleghorn was one of my junior ward officers. It was all 2-gun. We're flying Apache attack longbows. It was all 2-gun missions spread out over a 24-hour cycle. So
it's Iraq?
Yeah, this was in northern Iraq, actually.
What time frame is this?
Like 05. H.R. McMaster was the 3rd ACR commander. We did Operation Restoring Rights. It was a big deal. We shot a lot of shit. Yep. And like it was real trigger pull time. But in between missions, you know, Cleghorn was my wingman on the same cycle, and we would sit there and, you know, basically bullshit about how awesome would it be if we could be in the outdoor industry in some form or fashion and like actually still pay our bills and take care of our family and that type of thing.
You and every other soldier, like I did the exact same thing, only I never did it.
Yeah.
I'm not sitting in your shoes right now.
Yeah. So from there, the idea started to kind of grow, and it was just a concept, really. Yeah. It was just a simple concept, and came home off that deployment, and basically kind of wrote a 25-page business model. And really the very first monumental, like, I think, platform or launching pad that we had is that somehow it was really a prospectus, but it got into the hands of some of the head decision makers at Cabela's. Oh. And they contacted me and said, hey, we absolutely love this tactical hunting crossover. And they really loved one sentence in that whole thing. Like, one sentence like started the whole company. And the sentence was that we were going to spiral features and functions out of special operations apparel into the civilian hunting market. Yep. And we had a bunch of ideas. We saw all these improvements that had happened on all fronts, communications, weapons, gear in general, but there were some really good advancements that had come out just in everyday apparel that we were like, dude, that'd be really nice to have in the backcountry while you're on a hunt. And so that was the idea. And that launched us. I flew down to Sidney, Nebraska, met with those guys, and we had an exclusive with Cabela's for a better part of 3.5 years. The only place you could buy Kryptek was at Cabela's. Mm-hmm. And we weren't doing it in what's known as Kryptek now. We were actually licensing Mothwing mountain mimicry, that camo pattern. Oh, yeah. And so all the first original Kryptek gear was all in Mothwing mountain mimicry. And so, yeah, I mean, it was we were very fortunate, extremely blessed. I look back on it and I'm like, wow, that was miraculous, man. Like, first of all, how'd that guy get that? Where did he get it from?
You still don't know?
Yeah. I still don't know to this day how he got it.
This is interesting. So you were active duty and obviously a helicopter pilot, obviously. Mm-hmm. And well, I know you had a good career ahead of you. So you were a company commander, successful command in Iraq, fought with Josh and did good things. So you had a good pathway to battalion command. I think safe to say you're a future brigade commander. So in what year, Mark, did you leave the military?
Officially, it was on terminal leave at the end of 2007, and it actually culminated in 2008.
And so you were in the Army for how long?
10 years, 9 months, and 6 days.
Hitting that halfway mark.
Yeah, golden handcuffs on. I'd just been promoted below the zone to major.
Yeah.
I was actually got a call to come up to the TOC in Talifar, which I got called up there all the time because we were always, talking with JAG because the Air Force was tattletelling on us for shooting stuff on the Syrian border.
Air Force.
And so I thought, that's why I was going up there. But H.R. McMaster and his staff were on the back gazebo out back. They had cigars, and they basically were there to tell me I had been selected below the zone to major. And we smoked a cigar. They gave me the sat phone. I called my wife, and we had a big celebration. Unbeknownst to me, I actually had at that time anchored an ACRC slot at Gowan Field, and I was coming here to be an ACRC guy.
So and that's the active duty dude attached to the National Guard. So one person gets to do that, and you get to come back to your home state.
Right.
You grew up
that was the big deal. It was all about home state. My wife had already found a home. Super excited, right? So we get this notification that we're going back to Boise. Nikki's super excited. My wife's super excited. Everybody, all the family's super excited. I get this notification, hey, congratulations, you've been selected. Make the phone call. Like a week later, I go and check my email, and I've got an email from Human Resources Command that says, hey, congratulations, but we can no longer send you to Boise because now you have a bow leg P, promotable, behind your name. And so I didn't fight with them, but I was like, hey, I'm not going to pin on for like a year and a half or whatever, this is really important. And they're like, hey, go to the website and pick any job on there. You can do any one you want. And they had like all the premium jobs. So there was like Naples, Italy, Madrid, Spain, like super cool JSOC type stuff. And I contacted my wife and I said, check these places out and we can go to any of them. And her response was, I don't want to be overseas and I want to be home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and you need to figure something else out. Why don't you see if they'll send you to Leavenworth, because you're going to have to go to CGSC anyway.
You're about to hurt some feelings.
So I wrote an email back to Human Resources Command and said, hey, is there any way you could find me a position at Leavenworth so that I'm staged to go to CGSC? And so they went and carved a job out in the Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate, and I became the aviation SME for the Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate.
Yeah.
And that's where we pivoted to, and actually that's where I separated from.
So did that give you time to start thinking more and more about this? 'Cause
Well,
paint the picture of that time frame.
Dude,
you know, I'm sure
it was
Nikki,
one of the best jobs I ever had in terms of cooling my hills. Like
Yeah.
literally 9 to 5 with the 2 hours in the gym every day.
Yes.
You know, and it was like super cool. Well, airspace was just a disaster between Blackwater and the UAVs were all coming on board, and
the Apaches lost.
just everything in Baghdad and in Afghanistan. So they formed this new task force.
Yeah.
And literally I'd just come home and I came down on TDY orders back to Iraq and Afghanistan. And that was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back a little bit.
Yeah.
And there was another event, too, that got into the psyche of my wife a little bit. There was a colonel that was at Leavenworth, and I know you've been there, but, you know, if you go towards the back gate to where we were housed, you got to go through the military graveyard where all the white crosses are. Well, this colonel was told, you can either go back to Afghanistan on a MIT team and stay here so your kids can finish out.
And can you explain what a MIT team is?
It's a
mobile training.
It's a mobile training team that was over there to go train
With the low, so you
with the
basically embed,
Afghanis.
yeah. Yep. So not the safest.
No. So
Safest
you
spot
can
to be.
you can either do this and stay here. We'll send you over there, and then you come back, and your kids can finish out high school, or you've got to pop smoke and go TDY somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So he made this family decision, right, to stay at Leavenworth. Well, he's like a couple weeks into that rotation, and he gets killed. Well, they end up burying him at Leavenworth, and the burial site was literally like 20 yards off the road.
Yep.
And his wife was out there every day for hours and hours and hours. So now my wife is driving past this, and she's seeing this other FRG friend that's sitting there on the grave mourning over a decision that he made for the betterment of his kids. So anyway, and then I'm on orders going back over, you know, so there's a couple of major events there that kind of like had me really evaluating where I was and what I really wanted to do.
Yeah. That's that decision. Just, I think it's hard to emphasize, like, beyond 10 years, like, you're in, like, you generally,
Dude,
90% of guys don't get out at that point. That is a huge decision.
And to back up, I had been in some pretty significant roles too. I mean, I was, you know, the aide de camp for the commanding general of the Army Aviation Warfighting Center, General Sinclair,
yeah.
being groomed for these, you know, other higher levels of responsibility. I literally, as I went through that decision cycle to separate, I thought, I am, no, not to be conceited, but I am so important. Somebody's going to tell me no. Like, no, you don't do this. You're making a mistake, right? So I reached out to all my senior mentors at like GO level and colonel level. And I basically kind of said, hey, look, I'm thinking about doing this. It's a family deal, a family decision. And every single one of them all said, if you're doing this for your family, Butch, you're doing the right thing.
That's incredible, and that's really rare, I think, even among some of the best
I
senior
agree
leaders.
on that.
Because
Yeah.
I had a totally different experience. I was, you know, they tried everything, like first the guilt, and then like, you know, basically, what are we going to do without you? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Type of thing. And then it's funny to look back now because at that time, you're so loyal, you're so in it. It's really hard to gain the perspective, like, they're going to be okay. I'm one dude in the United States Army. Like, they're going to find someone probably better than me or 20 guys.
The culture at the Combined Arms Doctrine Directorate also probably facilitated this a little bit more. Had I been like in one of my aviation units or on a combat arms unit, it probably would have been a much more difficult idea. But I was still reaching out to guys that were like, you know, they were the men. And they still all said the same thing. So super, super difficult decision. Like, I spent 6 months on my knees, my wife and I, praying about it. And it was like super hard. And my thought was, well, if it doesn't work out, I can just come back in. Right. And actually my last OER, I haven't read it in a long, long time, but it was from a civilian DAC, Mr. Anchor. He was like a retired GO that they put in that position. And it basically says, and the last comment is, you know, if return to rank, if he re-enters, you know, promote below the zone. I mean, all these really very, kind comments, but that was always my backup plan. Fact was, I got a little bit to a point overwhelmed and stuff where I thought, man, I can never go back in because I have so much debt now. I'll never be able to pay it off.
Yeah. So you left the Army out of Fort Leavenworth, like and you're going to start this company that you have a business plan on paper. What was like step one?
I had a little, it was a different transition. I actually had a company I was involved with in Alaska.
Okay.
And so that was kind of like where I was going to land. And at the same time, I had this hobby idea company that I was like working on at the same time. So I went up to Fairbanks, Alaska, and took senior ownership in a transportation logistics company that was servicing the oil fields up in Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse. And that was a childhood best friend type deal. And I came in there and we did a bunch of cool super projects and things like that. But Kryptek wasn't started like just straight out cold, let's just start making clothing and camo. It was, okay, I really like this idea and it's a hobby. I'm going to work on it while I'm doing, this other thing that's actually going to pay the mortgage. And that was kind of it allowed me a transition out while I really refined and focused on Kryptek as a brand.
Are you trained in business management or development? Are you an MBA guy?
Poo hole, dude. I got my degree in mechanical engineering from Gonzaga University.
Yeah.
And I think that I've used that 0 times in this business, except for deductive reasoning, really. So no, none of that. And it's been baptism by fire and a lot of mistakes and a lot of hard lessons learned, for sure. So yeah, there was no professional training.
So how did that first year feel out then? Or how long were you in Alaska?
Well, it was, let's see, I think we were up there for about 5 years or 4 years.
At any point, do you feel like you made the wrong decision and it was time to go back in the Army?
All the time, dude.
All the time?
Yeah, the first 2 years were absolutely brutal. And then I had this like super surreal moment. I can still remember it and see it today. I was salmon fishing on the Gulkana River, which was one of our favorite things to do, obviously, as a family. Super cool. You could get the camper right down on the river. And my daughters were out there, super small. I'd been gone a lot from them.
Yeah.
When I separated, my oldest daughter, McKenna, was 6. I'd been gone 4 out of her 6 years.
Yep.
And my youngest was 4, and I was 3 out of her 4, just with how the timing worked. So I'm sitting there. It's a beautiful day. My daughters got hip boots on. They're out in the Gulkana River, and they're hooking salmon. And I just had this like super surreal moment where I'm like, I made the right decision. Regardless of anything else, I made the right decision. And to this day, the interaction and the relationships I have with my girls and my wife are, I made the right decision.
Yep.
So,
it takes a while to get to that, but once you hit it, like, there's no looking back. It's like the decision feels so good after that.
Yeah, once you hit that point, you're like, the light goes on, right?
Yeah.
And you're like, this is gonna work, and I did the right thing.
So you had to line up. So Josh Cleghorn, co-founder, how did you guys line up? Because he was still active duty also. Yeah. You got your family's decision, your decision. Josh, how did all that work out?
Okay, so he was still active duty. When we got back, he'd already assessed. He went and flew little birds in the 160th. And as Kryptek was kind of percolating and we were getting these calls from, Cabela's and things started to form, the next thing that came along was this big solicitation for the U.S. Army Camo Improvement Effort, which was, we want a new family of camouflage. It's going to become the camo for the entire U.S. Army.
Right.
Over the ACU?
That's amazing.
Come on.
Yeah.
How dare they?
You look so good laying down on a gravel parking lot. So when that tender came out, that solicitation, we already had some ideas like, hey, someday we're going to have our own camo patterns. And then that thing popped and we're like, dude, let's go now. Yep. Let's go now. And so the whole idea was to take what we saw from an aerial perspective, primarily with the most effective passive concealment measure on the battlefield next to a ghillie suit. Number 2 was camo netting. It stretched over a hide sight or stretched over a 10 or Humvee or whatever. And those hexagons get distorted and you got the fabric woven in and out and you've got kind of this 3-dimensional aspect. So Cleghorn was still active duty. I think at that time he'd moved on and was at SEER school
Rucker.
and doing a cadre role at SEER. And we took that kind of camo netting idea and we went and hired a 1099 consultant that could help us take our concepts and ideas and put them in the format that the DOD was requiring with the layered files and have everything dressed right dress. And we developed 3 camo patterns per the specs. One was for a woodland/jungle environment, one for a desert/arid environment, and then a transitional environment, everything in between. And did an enormous amount of legwork and got everything in order. And it was he and I on our cell phones and laptops, and that was our office. And we submitted them, and they took the first year like 900 soldiers and put them in a room, and they would do what was called a PIP, a picture inside of a picture, and had a halo device that would drop down, and they tracked their retinas, and they basically measured in microseconds how long it took. And they went from 60 some odd companies down to 4. Mm-hmm. And this was kind of a really big monumental thing for us because Kryptek got down selected with 3 other companies that were all billion-dollar companies.
Yep.
And we were the only veteran-owned company, and we were also the only service-disabled veteran-owned company. And it was, Cleghorn and I, and a few other outside 1099 type help. And my wife thought
it's all based off camo netting.
Going all the way back to World War II.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been around forever, right? It's just about like putting that on a 2-dimensional surface and not having a bunch of stuff hanging off of you and getting caught up and getting wet and being heavy. And so that was the inspiration. But that was a monumental point where we were like, whoa, and we got this crazy amount of organic lift out of it. And started, just lots of great things came out of that. And that's probably, monumental, blessing, crazy event number 2. So Cabela's number 1, this is number 2. And then it goes into the phase 2 testing. So we monetized on that after that first phase, which allowed us to go set up screens and rollers and start to do U.S. military grade printing, which was a pretty significant amount of cash.
Imagine.
That we wouldn't have been able to otherwise do. And
how did you do that?
The government paid us for that down select.
Gotcha. Yep.
There was a bid amount that said, okay, phase 1, if you go in to do this work, what's it going to cost?
They'll help on R&D.
And we were working with a company at the time, Duro, that was like, hey, if you guys get this, they had a bunch of feasibility studies that they had done that were a part of our submission that said this can happen if this concept, we can do this concept. So it wasn't just like the soldier testing with the retinas. It was also, can it actually be put into manufacturing? And that's how we were able to afford to do that, is that basically that phase 1 award allowed us to set up screens and print and do everything to basically fit the requirement for phase 2, which was a bunch of rolled fabric and printed Velcro and zippers and buttons and findings and finishings that all went to a third-party cut and sew that made the uniforms and made the plate carriers to all go into the phase 2 force-on-force naked eye acquisition testing and enhanced visual acquisition testing under infrared and shortwave infrared at night through NVGs.
Did you experience any sort of like now being targeted by these bigger companies because you got three big dogs and like, who are these 2 guys over here trying to step in? Did things change at all?
Well, it did as we got further and further into phase 2, and they're starting to be
doing well.
That's when the chitter chatter started.
Okay.
Like official chitter chatter, like let's say like one of the aide-de-camps from the SecDef to guys in the Pentagon to guys that were in the field doing the testing, like Kryptek's got this, Kryptek's won this. You guys better get ready. This is coming, right? And then we're like, holy shit, man, are you serious? So this is where we start to like really step off and say, okay, this is a big deal. We need to prep up for this. And in the meantime, I'm getting lobbyist groups out of DC that are contacting me, and they're like, hey, we do you have any representation in DC? And they already know we don't.
Right.
And I'm like, no, but we don't need it because it's the Army, and they're going to get the best. It's black and white.
Yeah.
This is how naive I was, right?
You wore ACUs, right?
Yeah. So in hindsight, those other companies, and specifically one, had major lobbyist activity in D.C. And that's when the bullseyes started to get put on the brands.
What numbers are you looking at? Like, how many uniforms could you have been producing?
So how the contract was supposed to go, it was a non-exclusive license with the DOD. So they got rights to it for 10 years, and we maintained the commercial rights to it. Nice. And so, like, we could put it on a coffee cup or a T-shirt or a hoodie or whatever, sell it to PX, right? Well, this was an open information bid, so when the bids came out, I had, like, done, I guess some smart math, and all 3 Camo patterns, I said, we'll do this license for like $6.3 million. And I'd based that off some numbers I'd seen with Cry Precision Australia and some other stuff. But then the competitors' numbers were there. And like the next one down was like Cry Precision, and they were like 650,000. And then you had the next one down was Hyper Stealth with Guy Kramer and Dr. O'Neill, was like 640. And then Brookwood, the mill, was like 80. And there was this requirement to maintain the intellectual property globally and all this. And I'm like, what are we missing? I'm missing something. Well, that's when the super smart articles started to come up and people started to talk about it. And they were like, whoever wins this, just the commercial value is worth at least a minimum of $1 billion over the next 10 years with a B.
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this is why all this political is happening in DC.
Yeah.
And so it was a huge number, man, like stupid.
So we've both been wearing multicams now for over a decade, and so we know you guys didn't end up with the contract.
Right.
But how did you guys transition there? Was that a huge failure?
No one ended up with the contract.
No one in that group?
No one. They took over $10 million in hard money to do the testing. Got super political, and actually Congress passed a bill that said by 2018, which is come and gone, that the entire U.S. military, Army, Air Force, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, anyone federally funded, Border Patrol, was all going to go to the same camo. And they never released the Phase 2 test results to anyone, not even to the companies. The Phase 2 test results are still under lock and key.
Really?
And I'm more than confident that Kryptek won it.
Sounds like a good FOIA request.
I've actually tried. I've tried through our political channels back into like echelons above reality, and it's been basically not obtainable. Because you think about what the U.S. as a whole would say, right? Then, well, why doesn't our forces have the very best, right?
Well, so I'm frustrated just hearing that, right? That pisses me off, and still to this day that no one even knows what the best answer was. So how did you guys deal with that frustration, and how did you make the transition from battlefield to backcountry with Kryptek?
We pivoted our camo into the civilian hunting market.
Just like that?
Just like that.
Was it gut-wrenching, though? Were you like,
well, dude, I thought I was like
$1 billion.
Oh,
like,
yeah. I mean, you have to look back at it. I mean, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be like in an island somewhere or something. I don't know. But
you have to find a different podcast guest for this month.
That's true.
But we pivoted because Cabela's had seen it, and they said, "Can we do something with this?" And so it was still during the Phase 2 testing, right? And we had a phone call with JAG. And it was like really weird, dude. It was like they were on
Army
speaker.
Lawyers.
Yeah, the Army lawyers on speaker, off speaker, on speaker, off speaker. Like we'd
really?
ask a question, they'd go off, then they'd come back on and answer it.
Lawyers are the best.
Yeah. So they're like, hey, this is your commercial. This is your intellectual property. You can do with it whatever you want. If you want to sell it to TJ Maxx, you can. That was like the response, right? And so, I mean, TJ Maxx and Cabela's are quite different, but that's what they said. So as this thing was developing, we were like also having conversations with Cabela's, and they were like super interested in it. Like they were intrigued by it. And so we made the decision, well, let's do it on the civilian side while they still hadn't made the announcement yet. And that was actually a really good decision.
Yeah, no kidding.
So.
And are you now in Idaho at this point?
Close to being back in Idaho.
Okay.
Yeah, close to being back. I think that phone call, as I remembered, I was in my office, if that's such a thing, in Fairbanks, Alaska.
And then you've since then set up shop in Eagle, Idaho.
Yeah.
So just in the Treasure Valley.
Well, so I was born and raised here. So was my wife, and we're both fourth generation Idahoans. Her great grandparents homesteaded here, and so did mine. But truth be told, when we were looking where to go set up shop for Kryptek, we analyzed all kinds of mountain towns, and take the emotional aspect of being, born and raised in Idaho out of it. Boise just kept coming up over and over and over for whatever it was that we were looking at, whether it was schools, crime, cost of living, quality of life, really in general. And then I flew Cleghorn out. Well, he flew himself out here, but he came out and to visit, still active duty, and spend a week here. And he was just like, dude, this place is awesome. Let's do it here, which was like the final, like, okay, cool, I'm glad you like it too. So we moved back home, basically. My wife's a BSU grad. Of course, I went to Gonzaga up the road, but...
Where'd you go to high school, Butch?
Nampa High.
Nampa High.
We both graduated from Nampa High. She was 91 and I was 1992.
Couple of Bulldogs.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool.
So what year did you open up your headquarters here?
It was a monumental year, if you want to call it a headquarters at the time. We just had a phone. It was in the late winter, early spring of 2014.
Yeah.
And it was kind of a big step.
Dude, that's not that long ago at all.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not being like, I don't sound like an old guy, but 2014, like the end of 2014, essentially.
Yeah.
And look at you now.
And so what are company stats now? Like what you've, from almost getting $1 billion contract to like, what does Kryptek look like today?
Well, we've got a global brand and a global presence, which we never imagined we would have. I mean, and to put the dollar amount on that, if that's what you're looking for, there's really not a dollar amount because it's super significant. A lot of that has generated out of us being included into the video games, Call of Duty Black Ops, Call of Duty Advanced Warfare, Tom Clancy, Ghost Recon. There's still more coming out. The movies, and then this like uber crazy cult following that has just like sprung up globally. Now, the brand's still way bigger than we are. And here in Idaho, I've got 11 folks at our administrative office. I've got another 7 that are scattered around the U.S., a couple at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and Tennessee, and in Texas and stuff. But we're still third-partying out like our pick, pack, and ship. We've got some other support groups and so on. So if I took the whole group and put it together, probably pushing 50 people that are, pushing the Kryptek brand. But it's been like, what can we do to catch up to the brand itself, But it's pretty interesting. I mean, if you start to snoop around and like do hashtag Kryptek, we got like Russians that are run, Kryptek people in Europe and Africa, and it's super fascinating to think because we never imagined that.
What do you attribute that cult following to with your company?
It's just simply the credibility and the authenticity behind the brand. I mean, it's not like there was a super bunch of smart business guys sitting around and they're like, oh, let's go start a camo company.
You are a mechanical engineer.
Well, I mean, super smart rich people that want to start a brand.
Yeah. I remember you and Josh were our very first guests at 43 Inc., our speaker panel series, and there's a statement that you guys made. I think about it all the time, and it's basically what you just said. Like, we're successful because we're authentic, credible, and cool. There's a cool factor to what you do, and it's like, I've always thought about what we do with Mission 43, and so it was
Cleghorn probably threw and the cool after I said because we're authentic and credible, and he was like and cool. So Cleghorn brings a lot of flair to the brand, and there is a coolness factor. I got asked on a podcast the other day, what's your favorite functionality of Kryptek?
Yeah.
And I was like, functionality? I mean, they go, well, besides the cars and what's your favorite application you see Kryptek on? I'm like, well, I'll tell you what's the most interesting is when people start to get Kryptek tattoos that you've never met before and they send them in. And I'm like, well, that is interesting, right? Like, why are these people going and getting like Kryptek, the camo, and then in many cases the logo? It's just like, what in the world are you guys thinking? I can see it like when Cleghorn does it because, he's one of the founders, right? That makes sense. It's good real estate. Let's get some publicity out of it. But there is kind of just like a super cult following out of it. And I think we resonate with a lot of the guys that are former or active military that also have the same passion that we do, which is the outdoors and hunting and fishing and family, those super important aspects of our brand.
When did you guys start using the phrase from battlefield to backcountry?
Right away.
Yeah.
Actually, it's debated, but I made that up. And it used to be from the battlefield to the backcountry, and then we went and made it from battlefield to backcountry. But it was so evidence, like that's who we are. Like that's just the fiber of our brand. That's so defining, right?
Well, dude, you look in the parking lot of this building right now, you'll see like giant Oakley stickers on the back of people, and those people have no like relationship with Oakley, I'm pretty sure, at least, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But you guys have a soul. Like you appeal when I see that on your website or whatever else, like on the tag of a shirt or a hat, like that appeals to me because you guys, at least in some ways, like I share something in common with you.
Yeah.
And the fact, like now that you have employees all over the country, right? You have a global following. How do you keep the Idaho feel, I guess, because I get that too.
Well, the Idaho feel is it's changing around us as we sit here and people are moving in. But, we tested in Idaho is a big deal. We've worked with Idaho Commerce, and they've got actually a whole program that's been put together around some conversations that originally started with us, like how can we tie more in to the Idaho aspect of it. But the culture of Idaho and the mentality of Idaho and how gun-toting, red state, pro-Constitution, pro-Second Amendment. I mean, it's not hard to maintain those aspects of within our brand.
Well, it's because you're not fake. It's who you guys are and what you believe in. You're not putting it out there as a marketing ploy.
Right.
It's just who you guys kind of are.
Really,
right?
And we've had to pick some sides here in this current political climate. I mean, I don't know if you guys are aware or not, but, we were heavily criticized and basically banned on social media because people were wearing Kryptek at the Capitol riot. And in particular, one guy that had a bunch of zip ties jumping over a seat. And so that was kind of like an eye-opener to like, wow, these guys have such a presence, right? Like you have to be on Instagram, social media, Facebook, but these guys can flip a switch in a heartbeat and just cut your legs out from underneath you.
How do you deal with that as a company? Like Black Rifle last year, or was it 2 years ago? Similar thing. Someone just wearing their stuff. It's not that you guys are affiliated.
Well, this dude was wearing a Black Rifle hat, and I called up Matt and Evan. I'm like, hey, have you seen this? What are we going to do? What we did is we went local, right? Yeah. And so the story got put on to local talk radio, KIDO, and then from there it blew up into other outlets that wanted to talk, and then it was on the front page of the Idaho Statesman. Mm-hmm. And then everybody that saw that locally that is like-minded like started buying more Kryptek, So I've also this is back actually into more of the military side. So from the very beginning of Kryptek, the very beginning when we said this is the art, and there's a story behind how we came with our logo and all this stuff, we had the Roman numeral 3 baked into that art. Mm-hmm. And it stood for the 3 focus areas that we had in mind. We had Kryptek apparel, Kryptek camo, and Kryptek adventures, which was the hunts that we would go on and film and talk about. Well, that 3 kind of has been, I guess, became very pro 2A for a number of years, and now this 3% idea, which is when there was the revolution against the British, 3% supposedly of the Americans actually stood up and fought the British, right? So that's what the whole 3%er thing's about. Well, fast forward into this, shortly thereafter, also this year, all the gear that I had at the Army Air Force Exchange System, anything that had Roman numeral 3, had to be taken off the shelf because now it's associated with and apparently much like a swastika, and it is a domestic terrorist symbol. That's another level of scrutiny that we took.
Yeah.
And then we just recently went through. So I'm talking like just normal T-shirts that have the Roman numeral 3 or a hat or whatever, beanie, things like that. Nothing to do with the camo at all.
It's the nature of going global, right? Like everyone's gonna, if you're literally everyone in the world has access and to your camo patterns, they can use it for whatever they want and make it theirs.
Well, they're not supposed to have access, but unfortunately, China has caused me a lot of headaches with access to our camo in certain aspects. The Chinese, their philosophy is if there's 10% deviation from the original, then it's not the original anymore. And so we do see a lot of piracy and stuff come out of it. But anyway, I think back to the question, how do you maintain Idaho? How do you maintain the fiber of our brand? Well, it's kind of one and the same for the most part, except really Blaine County, which is blue, right? I mean, the rest of the state is like, that is who we are, from the very fiber of farmers and ranchers, that's what my grandparents did and what my wife's grandparents did and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents. So it's one and the same.
Well, for the Mission 43 members that are out there and listening to this and watching you right now, a lot of us are like right in that transition period, whether we're thinking about making the switch from military, guard, whatever, to civilian life completely, or people that have separated and are still in that kind of window that we talked about a little bit in the 2 to 3 year mark, 5 year mark. Everyone's different, right? I was thinking like, holy shit, like what have I done and where do I need to go? Like what advice would you give to people like us?
Well, first, spend some time on your knees and do thoughtful, prayerful decision making. That's first and foremost. Then secondly is if you have an idea like starting your own business, it's a lot easier to do that as a hobby until it gets to the point to where it's more than self-evident, right? It's self-defining, so that you're not jumping into something and then, not able to pay your bills. And if slow is smooth and smooth is fast, that's the end state. Slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Be calculated, be smart. And then another point I would say is don't be in such a hurry to give up equity for cash. Or give up equity for expertise. Yeah. Because later on down the road, when your brand or your idea or your company is actually worth something, that equity, you're going to realize, man, I should have held on to that. I shouldn't have just given that to that guy so that he could help me with my website. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, dude, you're a man of principle. It shows every time we are lucky enough to interact with you. And it's just amazing having you as a community leader, being willing to participate in Mission 43 things. And we hope that the connection with you and that you get something from our members in some way, shape, or form back to the authenticity and credibility. And I would add, I think you're pretty cool too.
Oh, thanks.
So maybe Cleghorn was right.
I'm blushing. Yeah. No, I appreciate it. Mission 43 is an awesome organization, Idaho focused, and I hope that Kryptek can be of additional value to the organization as it continues to grow and help members as they transition out of the military back into civilian life.
Well, thanks for being here.
I appreciate it.
And I know a lot of people are going to be supporting Kryptek right now. They're getting out there to go lead, learn, and inspire, get their families out to backpack, hunt, and fish right now. So thanks for being here, Butch.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Butch.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us for the Mission 43 podcast. Our purpose is to provide you opportunities to lead, learn, and inspire throughout your Idaho communities.
We want to hear what you thought. Like, subscribe, or leave a comment below.